Good morning, everyone. This is going to be an episode about slavery. We've done one before on the slavery issue during the United States experience leading up to the Civil War and how the Christian abolitionists used God's word in Exodus 21, verse 16, calling it banned by God's Torah. And this is where it says, anyone who kidnaps someone, who sells him, or if he is found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. This is a universal command, and it was addressed to all the people who were at the delivery of the Ten Commandments. This is the immediate commands that come after that are universal commands stated by God. So this is one of them. And now I'm going to show you the application of that has to be used as a corrector of the current narrative. The current narrative is to call the problem I'm talking about child trafficking or human trafficking. That word sounds like we're trafficking in drugs, something that doesn't hurt or harm a soul immediately by being robbed of their freedom, being kept as a slave, used and abused. I mean, so it's it doesn't even tell you the full horror of what's really going on. So I'd say we need to use the right label, and it's a misnomer to call it child trafficking or human trafficking. I understand when they say it, but it's still not strong enough. It should be called abduction and slavery. And then we need to point out it violates Torah's universal rules that immediately followed the Ten Commandments, explaining to the people how they had to all live in community with each other. And the reason I say this is that it's obvious to me that God expects the people who are citizens who haven't committed this act have to go punish this person. So it's a requirement of everyone to join in and support an effort to prosecute that person. That was sort of a community understanding from this principle. It's not just simply, what do I have to do or what do you have to do? This is a crime against the public. Okay, so it's a crime against the public because one individual is suffering. It's either death, it's somebody's been killed, or in this instance, someone has been kidnapped and then uh, uh, turned into a slave. So this is a death penalty under the law, and you'll see I haven't thought about that. Would this, by adopting the harsh principles of God, Yahweh, which are, he's always said, oh, you're so harsh. Well, you know what? If it were this harsh, there may not be any child and human trafficking. We literally have to use a penalty that will send a message to them, and then it'll come to a stop, or at least it'll be severely curtailed, for the risk is too high. The reward is not equal to the benefits of money they're getting from doing this, or even their sick pleasures. So anyway, let's now I just want to remind you that what we told you in the prior episode about the African slave trade, it actually began by the crown in the 1500s, where they legalized kidnapping for the crown's use. You sounds crazy. The Queen of England did that. She kidnapped children for her own sick pleasure. Yes, but not for sexual pleasure, but for her musical choir pleasure. She wanted to hear the beautiful voices of children, and that was worth robbing families and parents from their children. It was legalized. Amazing, but you'll see. So this is just a quick review of what was in our slave trade, the African slave trade video. This is from JSTOR Daily. So this is a legal, JSTOR is a jurisprudence webpage. So if you're a lawyer, this is something you might read from time to time. And this says, Her Majesty's Kidnappers. In the 17th century, Nathaniel Giles had the right to conscript young singers into the British Royal Children's Choir. He and business partner went a step further. So that looks like this is only happening in the 1600s. But when you dig deeper, you'll find out it's worse than that. In 1600, 13-year-old Thomas Clifton was kidnapped, snatched off the street on his way home from grammar school. His kidnappers, two prominent figures in the world of London entertainment: Nathaniel Giles, master of the children of the chapel choir, and Henry Evans, producer of the Blackfriars Theatre. With the kidnapping, they intended to draft Thomas into the vibrant world of Elizabethan theater. They promptly handed the boy a script and threatened him with a beating if he didn't learn his lines, because they now owned him. Giles and Evans didn't bother to conceal their crime. When Thomas' father found them, the kidnappers taunted him, claiming they were well within their rights to seize his son. How could they be in their rights and do this so blatantly? Well, with Giles' royal warrant, the kidnapping of Thomas Clifton was arguably legal. That's the headline. In a way, they were right, as a master of the Royal Children's Choir, Giles, had the right to forcibly conscript young singers, period. Queen Elizabeth, remember the one was shown on TV and Netflix things? She's so wonderful and great. No, she wasn't. She's the originator of this kidnapping plan and then the kidnapping of the African slaves, because we got to go back in time and we'll cover that. She granted him a warrant to, quote, take as many children as he or his sufficient deputy shall think meet necessary in all cathedral, collegiate, parish churches, chapels, and any places as well as within the liberty as without. On this authority, good singers were seized from church choirs around the country and transported to the capital. With Giles' royal warrant, the kidnapping of Thomas Clifton was arguably legal. No, it was exactly legal. She did it under law. She gave a warrant. This warrant was intended to ensure that the King or Queen of England could enjoy the services of the most talented musicians in the country, but Giles and his partner Evan saw it as a business opportunity to bring talent to the Blackfriars Theater stage and to get bribe money. Oh, they thought about that one. Hey, we don't even need these kids. Let's just tell their parents we're taking them anyway, and if they give us enough money, we'll leave the kids with them. What do you think? That every little one crime then leads to the next crime. See? So if the queen is going to do crime, then we can do crime too. From worried parents. As James H. Force writes in Art Imitates Business. Okay, anyway, let me see what else I hear. And this criminal enterprise of the theater, choir people collecting human people off the streets in the choirs. This warrant was renewed in 1626, but with the added restriction that none of the boys he snatched should be used as, quote, as comedians or stage players. So that there was some benefit. The kids didn't have to try to do comedy or do a stage play. As it is not fit or decent that such as should sing the praise of the God Almighty should be trained or employed in such lascivious and profane exercises. So never mind the fact we've enslaved these children against the will of their parents, and just for our pleasure here to listen to beautiful choir music. This is sick. These people are ill, mentally ill people. Can't you see this? But nobody sees it. And even the word kidnap came from this enterprise by the crown. The original meaning of kidnap, dating from the late 17th century, that's the late 1600s, this period, was to, quote, steal children to provide servants to the American colonies. Now, it wasn't a crime when it was done, though. See, that's the point. And people would decry what the crown was doing as kidnapping, but it was legal. From kid or child in snatch way. After the particularly notorious Lindbergh baby. Okay, I'm not going to go through that. That's much, much later. And so here's an example. The crown was an equal opportunity kidnapper, not just African slaves, but people from Scotland, which are primarily not primarily of the white or Caucasian race. And they would literally say, hey, you know what? Goodbye to your children. We're taking them here to the different colonies all over the place. It could be Fiji Island. It could be, South America, North America. We don't know where your kid's going, but don't worry. You'll never see him again. And so goodbye, say your goodbyes and say your kisses. And that's the end of that. And so there's a whole documentation of this episode. And so lots of people would literally buy children in the New World so they could have children to serve as their slaves. This is sick, ladies and gentlemen. Kidnapping against God's word. Oh, why can we do this? Because Paul said the law is dead and gone. We can do whatever we want. What a wonderful world we live in. Well, so that's the song they would sing. What a wonderful world we live in. Because they're able to commit their crimes and are unaccountable to God. So they think. Anyway, there's a whole thing on this. And if you go back to the slave trade video we did, you'll see the whole thing. It's so sick. Such sick people. But anyway, where did it begin? Just so to get to the real root of the sickness. Well, some guy wanted to go capture slaves off in Africa, and it had never been done before. But he's going to use the authority and the influence of the Queen, some money. Queen Elizabeth I funds his vessel to go get the African slaves. So he goes and do that, and it worked out great. And that's the beginning of the slave trade. That was her. Same person who kidnapped kids is the same person who kidnapped Africans from Africa and paid for it. And then she paid fully for the next ship after that. And that began the whole slave trade. This was very profitable when you steal people, and even if they die, you don't owe any indemnity to their family. They die on the ships and they don't make it all. So at least we got 2/3 of them. The other third died on the ship while we were bringing them over to the New World. Well, that's life, and then we don't owe them a penny because we don't know who they are. I mean, this is the callousness of these human beings, and the same callousness was involved in the slave trade is involved today in child slavery and in human slavery that continues to this day, which we will get into later. And we reviewed. I'm doing this quickly. There was this man named Abraham Lincoln who says, you know what? Just out of conscience. He wasn't a Christian or anything. He decided he had read some of the abolitionist texts, which did but depend upon the Bible, and he just thought it was morally wrong. And so he fought to win a presidency. He was just just a lawyer, just by background, and he just thought this is wrong. And he wanted to run for president, and he wins. Okay, and then but before that was Christian abolitionism, and these were Christian activists with strong religious elements, and they initiated the abolitionist movement. And they were usually from uninstitutional Christian faith movements. In other words, they didn't fit within any category of the mainstream churches. They were outside the mainstream. They were people who were listening to God's word in the Bible and in the law, where it's universal. Anyone who does this is a criminal in the Bible. So they were not directly connected with any traditional state churches. That's how we can, ladies and gentlemen. So I was trying to say, and I'll say it again, is the movement we're trying to start here is to do untraditional church activities, which is to focus on Jesus and hopefully be a light to our brethren to free them. But the other thing is now, when we see an issue like child slavery and human slavery, this is something we can call out and start a bit of a movement here as well to help promote the end of that. And I think we need to bring back the death penalty. And people say, oh, you can't do that. Do you know we have a death penalty if you even, I think it's if you even threaten the president of the United States. And I can't say the words because we'll get in trouble. But I'm telling you, I'm warning you, if you ever did that, you've committed you're going to be not only in prison for life, you should be executed. I'm pretty sure it's a death penalty. And they do that for policemen too. So if you shoot them, the old days it was a death penalty if you shot them. Now I don't know what's going on, but that's, if you can set a high bar for the president, you don't want that to ever happen, then you better put a high bar on the same thing. Whereas you don't want to ever see a child or even a young human being taken away by forcible kidnap and used in slavery for the rest of their young life. And usually, they're far, I mean, it's just, yeah, you know what the results are emotionally for those people, don't you? And here was the argument that slavery used. It's going to be the same one I'm relying upon. It was Exodus 21, verse 16. Here you can see it, Exodus 21:16. This is the major text that launched the abolitionist movement from 1845. It was just written by a person who said, I'm a citizen of Virginia. That's all it was. We didn't even know who's the name. And he changed the world, this one little book. A condensed anti-slavery Bible argument by a citizen of Virginia, 1845, New York, printed by S.W. Benedict. And it said, Exodus 28:16 is a short description of the kidnapping and sale of one person by another, described as man stealing, the same being an entirely different transaction from the voluntary sales of servants by themselves, as described in Genesis, whatever. So the justification for slavery on the other side was, well, you're able to buy a slave, well, if you bought a slave of a person who was voluntarily agreeing to that, that's different. But just so you know, typically it's talking about what's called debt slavery. There were no credit cards in those days, so you could trade your labor in the future. If you failed to pay back in cash, you can say, I will become your indentured servant and work it off on my daily rate that I had, in our agreement between ourselves. Then I will pay it off over time. And the law even had a provision that after your sixth year of service, no matter what, you're always freed. So nobody in Israel should ever have a slavery longer than 6 years, a debt slavery, I should say. So it's your own consensual actions, and you receive money, and now you're paying it off. It's really debt servitude. It should not be called slavery. But you see how the King James Bible is helping them out by calling something that was really debt servitude as slavery, and so that gave the crown, which had created this whole problem, justification and rationalization of what they were doing behind the scenes, and why they could justify it. Well, it's okay because here this says it's okay for slavery but omitting the fact that in context, it was people who had been debt servants, become debt indentured servants. Let me say that. Okay, so just to show you, that's going to be the same argument probably will happen here if we start really ramping up the pressure that this is slavery. It's stop using the word trafficking. Okay, so next I'm going to show you a roundtable discussion of Sound of Freedom. That's the movie that was released after 5 years sitting in the can. Disney tabled it once they bought Fox. They just never produced this, and it would have died. But crowdfunding, after 5 years of crowdfunding, it finally made it out of the can. It was literally filmed, but would not be produced by Disney. Now it's going to be re-released, and it was released at the very time that Indiana Jones is coming out, a Disney movie, and it beat Indiana Jones in the first week. Or the first day, I don't know which one. Anyway, it's just like a poetic contrast, if you will. So anyway, but what's very interesting in this quote, I'm going to leave in there. They have a excerpt from CNN, alleged connection between Jim Caviezel and QAnon and all this stuff, and the movie uses QAnon catchphrases and all this stuff about a very serious problem, and it's totally being depicted realistically. And there's nothing about QAnon at all. It's not a conspiracy theory, and after that's over, I'm going to play a clip from Dr. John Campbell where you will see that international organizations, UN included, World Health Council, all agree that this is an actual problem that reaches up to many governments. It's inside the governments. The corruption involving child trafficking, human trafficking is up all the way at government level. And so this author on CNN is going to deride that's a QAnon conspiracy that people in high places are doing this. Well, you haven't looked at the documentation, sir. So you see, this is how a narrative is shaped on mainstream media, on CNN, and it's debunked by the very sources that are actually people out litigating and prosecuting these people as best as they can with limited resources. And as Dr. John Campbell will say later, we need to allocate more resources to fighting this very horrific crime against humanity. And so anyway, I'm going to now play the clip from this roundtable discussion of Sound of Freedom.
Next topic, Sound of Freedom. Have you seen the movie yet?
So a lot of people have asked me this.
Yeah.
As a new mom, I don't think I can emotionally handle it just because of the subject matter.
30 minutes. So we go into Indiana Jones. We're watching Indiana Jones, and then me, Matt Sapala, Sheena, Tikram, we sneak out and we go to watch Sound of Freedom. We're sitting there. And from the beginning, you're going to feel the pain of the father taking his kids, a daughter and a son, who is approached by a recruiter saying, your kids can be models, they can be in movies. He says, tonight, audition is at such and such time. Today, tomorrow's audition is such and such time. Father dresses in a suit, takes them to this room, and he takes the kids there. They're excited. Put the kids in the room, and the girl says, come back to pick them up at 7 o'clock. He says, what do you mean? Come back to pick them up at 7 o'clock. He leaves, comes back 7 o'clock. No one's there.
Shut down.
That's how the movie starts.
Yeah.
By the way, it's disturbing. It's emotional. It's tough. It's painful. At the end, Jim Caviezel gives a message. When the movie ends, 3 minutes later, he's given a message, profound message that you have to watch. The stats that they gave, that 20 plus million child pornography pictures were uploaded on the internet the last year, a 5,000% increase in the last 5 years. The idea where they said every year 2 million kids going to trafficking, going into being sold in the black market, and then stats about how you can sell cocaine one time, but you can sell the same child 5 to 10 times a day for 10 years is what you can do. And it's a $150 billion a year industry. And Jim is in it, the story of Tim Ballard, what he did. And then while this is going on, everybody needs to go watch it. I want to watch it first. It's a decision you need to make. I want to watch it first. I know what it is to be I don't know what it is to be a mother, but I have a wife that's had 4 kids, and I know how tough it is for a mother to see it than a father. Our perspective is more protective. Mm-hmm. Yours is more, you gave birth, it's your body. I recommend everybody to go watch this thing here and share it with everyone you know, because this is really taking place. This led us to yesterday having a conversation with many of the people in Glendale that are going through the challenges they're having with GUSD. We did the Zoom yesterday. We're excited about show up. Then I'll announce it publicly. And everyone's worried about, rioting, protesting, all this other stuff. Here's the point. While this movie comes out and it's doing so well, can you show up how Rolling Stone responded to, I send you those different screenshots when I airdropped it to you, what Rolling Stone said about cuties versus this, what different platforms said about cuties versus this. And by the way, while you're looking for that, maybe show the clip of the video of what the CNN person said about this, if you know which one I'm talking about, where the CNN is asking a question. So what do you think about this movie? There's a lot of people that are saying that there's some right-wing QAnon, what do you think about this? And this guest, you should see what this guest right there, if we can make that bigger, you should see what this guest says about this movie.
Pretty familiar with him.
Watch this. Go
Can
on.
we play this?
Of course.
Yeah,
Watch
okay.
this.
And you seem pretty familiar with him because he doesn't really hide his association with this real wild plot that involves, drinking the blood of children and things like that.
No, he doesn't hide it at all. And you have a lot of people who are in this world of QAnon who say, oh, they don't know what that is. They've never heard of it. They're just asking questions. With somebody like Jim Caviezel, he is openly embracing it. He's openly using its catchphrases and its concepts. He's speaking at QAnon conventions. And this film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking. But that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory. Tell us how those two things work together.
Sure. And the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true and the rest of it is false. But the believers point to the one true thing and they say, oh, you don't believe that this particular thing is true. In terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down. So there's a very participatory element. You're not just going to see a movie, you're just killing 2 hours on a hot day. You are helping bring down these pedophile rings and save children. Now, it's not true, but it's a very comforting and it's a very warm feeling.
You know why you have to trust this guy, Pat? He has books behind him. Anybody that sits with books,
Smart.
But notice it. If you work out, you're a white you're a white supremacist, whatever. If you're, by the way, this movie was they actually have footage of everything that happened of Tim Ballard because it happened.
Did you see the movie?
I saw the movie.
Oh, you saw it? Wow.
I saw the movie, and I was telling Pat some crazy moments are where they actually had footage, undercover footage or surveillance footage of people in third world countries and stuff going up to people like a kid wanders in the street. They grab them in a van and they're gone. It's not a conspiracy theorist. And then it begs the question when people are like, why does one side want open borders? And why is it, if you think about it, Pat, there's a fact. 350,000 unaccompanied minors come across the border since 2021 till right now. 85,000 of them have gone missing. And then that begs the question, why is one side just like, no, the border's secure. Mayorkas, that little rat. No, the border's open. That is just an inventory of just human beings coming in. And it's like for them to say that it's QAnon and it's fake, it's like they don't want people messing with their influx of children. It's a huge problem. And yes, they made money off this movie, but now look how many people are talking about sex trafficking and these kids, and at least somebody now is opening their mouth. And by the way, this movie was made 5 years ago. I don't know if you guys, this movie's old. Now
which movie?
Sound of Freedom. Yeah.
Nobody wanted to put it out. Go ahead, Lauren. Go ahead.
Well, it was made by Fox before the Disney acquisition. So then Disney, they essentially didn't release it. They didn't want to release it. They sold it to this other studio, and the studio actually had to crowdfund to get a theatrical release. So that's kind of what's ironic about the fact that it did beat Indiana Jones, at least for one weekend, is that this could have been money going to Disney, but it's also kind of suspicious. Why didn't Disney want to release this movie? Was it not in line with their branding?
And by the way, isn't Disney a kids channel? Isn't it like about kids and protecting kids? So why wouldn't you want to protect kids worldwide? Isn't that kind of weird?
Perhaps
Yeah.
they don't really want to.
And isn't it shocking, Lauren, that they're
is
talking
that?
all this stuff about conspiracy? Are you trying to act like Epstein didn't have an island and flew people?
Yeah, that we know
all
this for a fact
It's
that
a
this
fact.
happened.
He was murdered. Don't believe the hype. He was suicided himself. That's all bullshit. CNN producers getting caught left and right for pedophilia. The numbers are staggering. It's in the news. It's not reported a lot. And just perverted people, Pat. To Catch a Predator. Do you guys know that show?
Yes.
Disgusting.
We had Chris Hansen on here.
Guess what? That show can run every single day for forever because there's no shortage of pedophiles. The only reason that show stopped is because one of these idiot demons ran in the house and killed himself.
And that's what's frustrating about that CNN guy. He's acting like moral outrage over this is bad or unwarranted. He's asking as if, oh, it's to spread fear. Yeah, you should be afraid for your children. You should be actively trying to prevent this. Why is moral
Bingo.
outrage bad when this is something that's objectively evil?
This is an area to be intolerant in, like zero tolerance for this. By the way, watch this. So Rolling Stone, look how different the titles are. Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. The QAnon thing, the thriller about child trafficking, is designed to appeal the conscience of a conspiracy-addled boomer. Okay, pretty wild. Now let's go to the next one. Watch this next one here. The Guardian. Cuties Review. Netflix's controversial child exploitation film is bold, flawed, and misunderstood. Misunderstood. Okay, so here's the next one. Cuties Review. A coming-of-age movie caught in the culture wars. Thanks to a major marketing mistake, this award-winning French movie has been accused of sexualizing girls. It's actually a sensitive portrait of growing pains that deserve to be seen. Are you kidding me? Go to the next one. Okay, the human traffic film Sound of Freedom trashed by liberal outlets as QAnon adjacent.
So I just want to show you something. Here is the Guardian article about the movie being attributed or connected to QAnon. And the director got to speak his mind here. The writer, Alejandro Monteverde, told Variety that he began writing the film in 2015, 2 years ago, before QAnon formed, after seeing a news segment about child sex trafficking. His film stars Jim Caviezel as Tim Ballard, a real former special agent for the Department of Homeland Security who investigated sex crimes against children. So this whole idea of connecting this movie to QAnon is baseless, and you have it on CNN, mainstreamed. Now it's everybody says, oh, it's a QAnon film. It's to support QAnon. No, it didn't even exist when this was written. And more importantly, what is the fact? So now we're going to listen to John Campbell tell us the actual facts, and he will tell you this is existing at the level of government also around the world. There are governments that protect this activity. We're not talking necessarily about our government, but there's no doubt that that Jeffrey Epstein, as one of those commentators said in the roundtable, what about Jeffrey Epstein? He definitely was running a pedophile network on his island, and so there are people in high places, obviously, just like there is in any community, that who engage in this behavior and have. You'll see. Anyway, let's take a look at Dr. Campbell so we can get the big picture.
Well, a warm welcome to today's talk, Thursday, the 7th of September. Now, today's material is deeply unpleasant, but I do feel it needs to be addressed. It's a massive global health concern, and I would ask you to try and stick with it. Now, it's based on this information from here. This is the World Council for Health, and this is their article based on this policy brief, action on a call to action and policy brief on human trafficking. Now, I was just simply taken aback by the scale of this. Now, I am using mostly the World Council for Health website, but I did go back and check on all the primary sources that we're using, and they are from reputable government agencies, and we'll look at some of those as we go along. Now, check it out for yourself. That's the website. Download it, free download there. Human trafficking in human beings, modern slavery, whatever you want to call it, affects all age group. Sexual exploitation is 66% of the whatever you want to call it, the movement, the trade, the market. So it's mostly for sexual exploitation, but also for labour and servitude, and also for organ and blood removal. They also come into it. Exponentially growing worldwide. On the internet especially, trafficking of children for online commercial sexual exploitation, videos and photos. I'm not quite sure what I'll get tripped up on the algorithm here, so we won't say too many of these words. but I think you can read that for yourself. This includes toddlers. Okay, now I'm going to be using information, as I say, from quite a few websites. I'm just going to show you a few of them now. We've got information here from the Human Trafficking Department, Homeland Security in the United States, United Nations, 50 million people in modern day slavery. Methods used by these groupings, sometimes national actors, sometimes organised crime, sometimes more opportunistic. So deception, kidnapping, coercion and force, violence and torture, force to watch abuse, and quite widespread use of drugs, especially in transit. US Department of Homeland Security, they say this. Check out the website for yourself, it's all there. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. Annual revenue estimated in 2014, which is 9 years out of date, 150 billion US dollars. We don't have an up-to-date figure. And it's the second largest state and organised crime criminal enterprise in the world after illegal drugs. International UN Labour Organization, part of the United Nations. Check out the reference for yourself. This is all written there, I have checked it out. They're saying in 2022, 50 million people, 1 in every 150 people in the world, living in conditions of modern day slavery. Over 12 million are children. Now, World Council for Health, we call for decisive targeted measures to end human trafficking. Of course, these include, but not limited to, the following. Public awareness needs to increase, which is why I've got permission from the World Council of Health for this. There needs to be legislation, there needs to be law enforcement, care of survivors, and we need cultural change. It is not acceptable to look at abuse online in any circumstance. This is just not acceptable. So there we have it. Massive problem of international abuse, largely for sexual exploitation, but for forced labour and for blood and organ harvesting as well. And of course, these often go together. People can be sexually abused as they're being exploited for labour, followed by organ theft. All these things are possible together. Well, I've nothing to say really. I'm just amazed I've got through that. I'll leave that with you.
All right, so I think John's reaction to what he was even saying, like, how can I even get through telling you about this? And I cut out some of the more gross stuff, but you will find his video online. He's talking about September 2023. All those millions of children, millions of people are slaves, and we are looking the other way. This is no different than the time that the slaves were in our own country. These are people who are actually slaves in our own country too, by the way. There's a market inside of our country, but in other countries, and we need to stop this international trade in this slavery and the abduction and slavery of children and humans. So anyway, and all I'm going to say is that as Christians, true Christians who are following Christ, we want to enforce the law that applies to everyone, and everyone in the world is subject to this command. This is any person, not just sons of Israel, not sojourners. This is very clearly everyone. There's no ever a moment this is not contained within God's word right here. It's a crime against humanity, and it's stated right here. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold into slavery or still in the kidnapper's possession. And that will hopefully put an end to it. So let's work for legal reform, support people in, remember, there's the other thing, the recovery of these people. So they get out of that world. They need a place, they need some safety to feel comfortable and to restart their lives. So there's all kinds of ministry that we can do, just like it was done in the slave trade. And let me just say this to you. Had the correct penalty been given to the slave traders of the South in the 1600s, the 1700s, and the law was actually enforced from God's law, that was the standard. Do you want to know what would have happened? That all of the property, those slave owners would have ended up going to the slaves, because they were the ones who owned it. Really, it was their labor stolen. So this would have compensated them immediately from the right person, for the person who had to pay for the crime of what they had done. And that's exactly what we need to do with these people. By not having done the resolution of the slave trade problem, we do have an unrequited situation where the slaves did not get compensation from those who had victimized them. But now we're in the same situation. Are we going to repeat that same mistake now? No. So when these people are killed and executed, then their property, that was the money that's in their hands, has to be presumed came from the labor of these sex slaves, these organ slaves, to give back to them the money that is found with these from the estate of these people who have to be executed by law. And the government should go pursue every asset they have to distribute it back to their victims. Anyway, that's the right justice, and that's what God wants. And but we have to do it by legal reform. Do not take the law into your own hand. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And he uses judges and justice and courts and hearings and trials and witnesses, and 2 witnesses for every crime. And that's another thing. I believe the death penalty should never exist without 2 eyewitnesses that can confirm something. I know that's going to raise the standard, and some people go free, but that's the point of God. Some people do go free by that, but the innocent don't get convicted, and we don't want to send anyone to death by just circumstantial evidence. That's my opinion of how that should be done. All right, God bless. Take care, everybody. Ciao, bye.